So now that they have the Devon Archer testimony that seems to confirm a whole lot of what was in that laptop and what other witnesses have testified with regard to Hunter Biden's business dealings and his father's knowledge, if not outright involvement, what does the House of Representatives do next? Well, let's bring in John Solomon. He's the founder of JustTheNews.com and has been following these stories for many years, well before we even knew of the laptop. John, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good to be with you.
Well, what are your sources? It seems like we've got three committees at play here. We've got oversight, we've got judiciary, and we've got ways of means. What are your sources on Capitol Hill tell you in terms of what the roadmap forward might be with these investigations?
Well, that is a really good question. Let me first just pause for a second and understand what those Hill committees have achieved. It is now an irrefutable story now that Joe Biden lied his way into office in 2020. He gave the American public 5 seminal lies distributed through the news media, and all of them have been disproven. By the way, some of them disproven by the testimony of his son and some of his family's closest friends. And let me just give you those quickly because they're so important. My family didn't get money from China. Hunter Biden said that was a lie. In his elocution last week before his plea deal fell apart, he said he got $664,000 for China in 1 year. James Comer put the bank records out, $1.3 million to the rest of the family. That's a big problem. I never met with my son's business partners. Both Rob Walker and Devon Archer now say that's a lie. Walker saw a Chinese meeting. Devon Archer saw 20 plus meetings or phone calls there. My son never did anything wrong. That was a big one. To the contrary, Hunter Biden called his father a lawyer by admitting he was involved in a long and an intentional tax scheme. He elocuted, he just couldn't get to plead because the judge blew up that plea deal. He said, I knew nothing about my son's business deals. That's simply not true. There's lots of text messages and things going on. That's a very important thing. And then finally, he and 51 of intelligence experts aligned with him in his campaign said the Hunter Biden laptop was disinformation. At the time they said it, that was patently false. We had long sustained it. Those are 5 seminal lies. Joe Biden told the American people to become president. He lied during his job interview. That in and of itself is a consequential thing. Rolling back those 5 lies is a big, big moment for the American people. I think we got to absorb it and appreciate its impact on the 2024 election.
I think, John, that's a great point. It's a great recitation of these 5 important lies. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who say, oh, well, you know, politicians lie. No, but these are consequential things about crimes and investigations and corruption. And by the way, you know, no one in the media thought to actually challenge these lies. My favorite is that he claimed that he never talked to his son about his business and then adamantly said, we never made money from China. John, how did he know they never made money from China if he never talked to his son?
That's a brilliant thing. I never thought of it, but that's the perfect impeachment question, right? I mean, in the factual sense, not in
not in Congress, but yes, Chris Wallace, the debate moderator, could have very much made that point. Yeah.
Listen, Joe Biden was in a protection racket. The Weiss office was protecting him, the FBI was protecting him, the IRS was protecting him, and the American news media were protecting him. When this story is finally written for history, the news media will have been one of the largest aider and abettors in covering up the Biden family scandal for 4 years. It's now unraveling, but there was a cover-up in the news media. My colleagues, people I worked alongside of for decades, they were a major part of that cover-up.
Yeah. So we have testimony from whistleblowers on the tax case, but they also testified that they were stopped along the way by the FBI and the Justice Department. That's the obstruction aspect of it. We've got testimony from business partners. We've got records, bank records showing wire transfers. We've got the red flags from the banks saying, hey, there's something fishy about all these overseas transfers. We've got the 21 shell corporations. What's missing at this point to sort of put it all together and make the final argument?
Yeah, I think there are 3 seminal inquiries left to really resolve this before we determine whether there's going to be an impeachment inquiry. The first is, do the tapes exist? We have an FBI 1023 that says that Mykola Zlochevsky and his sidekick, as the owner of Burisma, a guy named Vadim Pozharsky, made tapes in which Joe Biden and Hunter Biden are doing the shakedown. If those tapes exist, that's a really big development. The second thing is, did Joe Biden get any money from this? There's a discussion in many quarters that there was $10 million set aside for Joe and his son Hunter. Hunter got payments. It's irrefutable. Burisma paid him. And by the way, he was being paid at $83,333 a month, which in 60 months would equal exactly $5 million, the figure
Imagine
that the
that.
informant. Yeah. So now, is there $5 million for Joe somewhere there, and will it be found? Was it in cryptocurrency? Was it in an overseas bank account? That's the second question. The third big question is the current story that we've been force-fed since impeachment 2019 is that, yeah, Joe Biden fired the prosecutor, but he was only carrying out official U.S. policy when doing it. It had nothing to do with his son. Now, we learned from Devin Archer yesterday his son was being pressured to get rid of the prosecutor. That's a big change because it means Joe Biden's actions actually benefited exactly what Hunter Biden and his client were looking for. But if we find out that, and I'm hinting at something that I might be soon be reporting.
Yeah, I'm leaning in. I'm leaning in.
Yeah,
Joe.
I can see. I'm trying to draw you in. That if we find out that Joe Biden actually took an action that was opposite of what the U.S. policy makers were saying at the time, those three seminal questions, how they're answered, will probably determine whether Congress moves to an impeachment proceeding or not.
Meanwhile, John Solomon, as you know, most of the cable news stations talking about American politics and legal wranglings right now as we speak are talking about a different case, Donald Trump and these charges from Jack Smith. I read earlier today on Just the News, though, that Mr. Smith had to admit a pretty major error in the last charges he put forth over classified documents. What's that all about?
Keep in mind this man's record. He was reversed 9-0, which means the liberal justices joined the conservative justice. That almost never happens in the Supreme Court, reversing the political conviction or the political corruption case against former governor of Virginia, Bob McDonnell. That's very important because it creates a pattern for this prosecutor. Yesterday, Jack Smith went in and said, "Oh, Judge Cannon, the one handling the classified document, oops, we told you something about evidence. It wasn't true. We didn't give all the evidence over to President Biden or President Trump, and we're going to give it to him now." That's a major. It's called a Brady violation. It's a major revelation in that case. And today, I think there's another very important thing. Remember what Jack Smith, when he sat at the podium last night in a news conference, I've never seen a prosecutor give like that before.
Yeah.
He said, President Trump willfully and knowingly lied. I know what was in President Trump's head, and I can prove he was committing fraud when he said, I think there was an election thing. There was an election fraud. He literally was pulling the wool over the American eyes, knowingly and willfully making a lie. There is new documents from Bernie Kerik. They were just turned over in the last 2 weeks. Jack Smith didn't seem to review them. You know why? He's not even interviewing Bernie Kerik about them until next week. But these documents show that on January 5th, the day before the events of January 6th, 2021, the investigative leads that they believed were unresolved election irregularity or fraud cases, and they knew they didn't have enough time to go get them themselves investigated, so they were working on a plan to get Congress, state legislators, and election regulators to look at that. If the chief investigator, Bernie Kerik, former NYPD commissioner, and the chief lawyer for Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, believed that these were active leads that needed to be investigated, it creates a state of consciousness that could very much undercut the argument Jack Smith just made. It's unbelievable. Jack Smith would pull the trigger on the indictment before resolving this question with Bernie Kerik with an interview or a grand jury appearance.
Wow, we will certainly watch that story. By the way, you got to love the irony that Jack Smith just admitted in open court that he didn't hand over all of the documents to the defense, Donald Trump. Isn't that literally what those charges are? That Donald Trump didn't hand over all the documents back to the government? Also, you mentioned former Governor Bob McDonnell. I want to let our audience to know that the former governor will be our guest tomorrow on this program to talk about his situation with Jack Smith. It sheds a little bit more light on it. Real fast in our last minute here, Jack Smith said that he wants to move swiftly and have a quick trial. Any thoughts about what the Trump team might say? I would love for the Trump team to say, let's go, let's get it down now, but I doubt that's where they're headed.
There are such huge constitutional issues, presidential immunity, double jeopardy related to the impeachment trial, first speech issues. All of those are going to have to be litigated. Every lawyer I talked to last night told me, Democrat, Republican alike, this is going to be months after the 2024 elections over this particular case. And by the way, it's such a complicated case, it could affect the other case in Florida. We might have to ask for a stay on that because there's so many issues flying around and some of them are interconnected. I think Jack Smith is going to end up on the slow track on some of this.
My instinct is to be exhausted already, but I'm paid not to get exhausted. and if the American people aren't exhausted, I refuse to. John Solomon, thanks as always. JustTheNews.com. Thanks,
Thanks, Larry.
There's more to come. Keep it here. O'Connor Tonight.